Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's cook with me is going to be crab bisque soup and homemade peasant bread. This is what is for dinner tonight in our house. So come along and cook with me. Okay, so the ingredients we need for our bread: flour, kosher salt, you can use regular salt, some active dry yeast, and either sugar or a sugar substitute. This is Lakanto monk fruit sugar substitute. And we also need some water, and that is it. Let's get started on this bread because it needs to rise and I'm running behind. First thing we're gonna do is take our water, lukewarm water, 110 to 115 degrees. I use my thermometer to check it. It needs to be warm enough to activate the yeast, but not too warm that it's going to kill the yeast. And it's just right, so I need to get moving. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to put in 1.5 tablespoons of sugar or sugar substitute. And let that dissolve. And then to that, we're going to add a teaspoon of active dry yeast. I buy my yeast in bulk. You can buy those little packets. You're gonna be shocked at how easy this bread is, and it is so delicious. And the points aren't bad. So we have a teaspoon of yeast, and we're gonna put that right in there, and we're just gonna let it sit. I'm gonna put it off to the side while we get the flour mixture ready. So in a large mixing bowl, we're gonna take 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Now I am halving this recipe. This recipe normally makes 2 loaves, but I do not need 2 loaves because if I have 2 loaves laying around, I would eat it because it's that good. The great thing about this bread is it's perfect for first-time bread makers because there's no kneading and it's pretty foolproof. So we have got 2 cups of all-purpose flour, and then we're gonna do a teaspoon of salt. Like I said, I'm using kosher salt. You can use regular. And then we're just gonna whisk that together. Set that aside and bring our yeast back. Can you see that? See how it's getting a little bit foamy and bubbly? That means that the yeast is alive and working. You can leave this yeast sit for like 10 to 15 minutes until it's more foamy and more bubbly. That's just to ensure that it's active. I see that it's working, so I know it's gonna be fine, and I know my yeast is fresh. So I'm just gonna mix this all up. And I'm going to pour it into our flour. And then mix it with a wooden spoon, or you can use a rubber scraper. And this mixture will be sticky. That's the nature of the bread. Now, at this step, you can do one of 2 things. You can just let it rise right in this bowl and then transfer it to the bowl you're going to bake it in, or you can transfer it right now and do everything in the next bowl. Personally, I like to transfer it now. So let me get the bowl that we're gonna bake it in, and I'll show you how I prepare that. Okay, so I have a 1-quart Pyrex bowl, and I have it sprayed with nonstick spray. I'm just going to dump the mixture right in. And that's it. No kneading, nothing. So now we have to cover this and let it rise for about an hour and a half, 2 hours until it's doubled in size. Now what I like to do is I like to cover it with some plastic wrap. You don't need to do that. You can just cover it with a damp towel, but if you do you. So I'm going to take some plastic wrap, give it a little spray, cover it, and you should put it in a warm place. Now, what I do, I cheat a little. I'm gonna go over to my oven. I'm gonna put it on preheat to 200 degrees. I'm going to let it preheat for 1 minute. It is not going to get up to 200 degrees. It's barely going to get up to 100. After 1 minute, I'm going to shut the oven completely off, put this in the oven, and let it rise in there. Make sure you shut the oven off if you're doing it this way. You do not have to do it this way. It just helps it rise a little quicker, and I'm on a little bit of a time crunch. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put it in a very, very, very low oven that's not even on, to let it rise. So I will be back in about an hour and a half, 2 hours, hot minute for you guys, to show you what it looks like when it rises and show you what our next step is. Okay, so this just came out from the first rise. Now, if we were doing the whole recipe, it would be in a big bowl. And now we would divide it into 2 smaller bowls to bake it. But since it's in 1 bowl, we don't have to divide it, but we do have to kind of punch it down. And with this dough, we're just going to use 2 forks. Now, like I said, if it was the whole recipe, I would do this and separate it and plop each half in a bowl. But because I'm not doing that, I'm just kind of punching it down and deflating it. And then we're going to just let it rise for the second time. And we're going to bake it right in this bowl. I probably should have made the whole recipe for you guys, because I really hope I'm not confusing you. Not that I don't think you understand. I don't mean it like that. I know what I'm trying to say, but sometimes it's hard to convey what I'm trying to say. So there it is. It's all punched down. And now I'm just going to put a damp dish towel over it. Put it over in the warm spot in my kitchen and let it rise for another half an hour. Then it'll be time to bake it. I'll show you what it looks like after the second rise. So here's the bread after the second rise. It did not rise as much as it normally does. Usually goes a little bit over the edge. Not quite sure why, but it's time to bake it. So we are going to pop it in the oven at 425 degrees for 12 minutes. Then we're going to reduce the temperature to 375 and bake it for another 12 minutes. And while this is baking, we're going to get started on the soup. The bread is out of the oven. It looks delicious. So I'm just going to turn it out onto the cooling rack and let it cool until it's time to slice it and serve it. I'm going to keep it upside down like this while it's cooling, because the bottom's a little heavier than the top and I don't want it to, I don't want it to collapse on itself. So we're going to just leave it like this and let it cool so it's easier to slice. Okay, here are the ingredients we need for the soup. We need 3 tablespoons of light butter, 1 small onion finely chopped, 2 stalks of celery finely chopped, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper or to taste, 1 teaspoon of Old Bay seasoning. They're all in this bowl together. Then we need 2 cloves of garlic, minced, 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, 3 tablespoons of flour, 3½ cups of vegetable broth. This is 4 cups. I might just use the whole thing. We'll see. Half a cup of white wine, 1 bay leaf, 1 cup of fat-free half and half, 1 pound of crab meat. Now, if you're really fancy, you can use the jumbo lump or the lump. It was $25. Yeah, not doing that. And I kind of like claw meat for a soup. I think it gives it more flavor. So I got the 1 pound of claw meat in the seafood section of the grocery store for $12. And you can also get some chopped fresh parsley for garnish, but I did not have any. So they are the ingredients we need for the soup. Let's get it started. Okay, so we have our pan heating and we're gonna add in our 3 tablespoons of light butter. We're gonna let that melt. And to that, we're gonna add our onion and our celery. Make sure it's all coated in the butter. And then we're just gonna let it go. We're gonna let it cook for about 5 minutes until the onion and the celery start to soften up a bit. Yeah. Okay, so this has been cooking for 5 minutes, and now we're gonna sprinkle the salt, the pepper, and the Old Bay right over top. Give that a nice stir. Then we're going to stir in the garlic and the tomato paste. And really give that a nice stir until all the veggies are coated with the tomato paste. And we're going to let that cook for about 2 minutes. While stirring constantly. Okay, next we're going to put in the flour. And once again, stir, stir, stir until that's incorporated, and let it cook for about a minute just to get that raw flour flavor out of there. And the tomato paste addition and the flour addition, I turn the pot down to a low, medium low. So once this is cooked for about a minute, we're going to add the vegetable broth. Now, if you can get your hands on some seafood stock, or if you make homemade seafood stock, that would even be better. But I don't and I couldn't, so we went with the vegetable. Okay, now we're just going to add in the vegetable broth. It calls for 3.5 cups. This is 4. But I am going to add all 4 in. And then we're going to add in the wine. Half a cup of white wine. You absolutely can omit that if you'd like. Now we are going to turn it up till it comes to just a boil. Then we're going to turn it back. We're going to reduce the heat and let it simmer. Oh, I forgot the bay leaf. At this point, you want to drop your bay leaf in. So we'll get it nice and hot to a boil. Then we'll cut it back to a simmer, and we're going to let it simmer for 30 minutes. Okay, so it's coming up to a boil, so I'm going to cut it back, and I'm just going to let it simmer. And it doesn't specify covered or uncovered, so I'm going to just kind of do a little bit of both. And I'm just going to keep checking it to make sure it's not boiling too hard and it's just a nice light simmer. And we're going to let that go for 30 minutes. Okay, it's been simmering for about 30 minutes, so we're going to remove the bay leaf. And then we're going to take an immersion blender and blend it on high. If you do, until it's smooth. If you do not have an immersion blender, you can just puree it in a blender in batches. But let me tell you, these are handy tools. This is just breaking up all of the garlic, the celery, the onions. So we have a nice, smooth soup. Because the only chunks that you want in here are the crab. Okay. That's done. It is nice and smooth and smells delicious. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the crab in. I'm going to do the half and half first, sorry. Crab in the half and half, but we'll do the half and half first. Stir that till it's nice and combined. Just turn it up a little bit so it heats through. Now, personally, I like a really thick bisque. So what I think I'm going to do, this is not quite thick enough for me. I think I'm going to make a little cornstarch slurry and add that in. So before I add the crab in, I'm going to prepare that and I'll show you what I do. Okay, it's just starting to come to a boil. So I'm going to add in the slurry. This is 1.5 tablespoons of cornstarch to 1.5 tablespoons of water. And then I'm going to turn it down and stir it. You still want it to bubble a little bit so the slurry can activate. And I'm going to let that just cook for about 3 minutes or so till it's thicker. And then we'll come back and we'll add the crab in. Okay, that thickened up nicely. So now I'm just going to add in the crab. Trying not to break it apart too much because you want those nice chunks in there. And then we're just going to let that crab heat through just for a couple minutes. And then I'm going to measure out how much soup there is. Figure out how much a serving is. Get it plated up, garnish it, and we will show you what it looks like. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to measure it in a bowl or weigh it out. I broke my 8-cup measuring bowl, so I'm trying to think what I can measure it in. I'll be back to show you. So I weighed out the soup because I couldn't find anything to measure it in, and it came out to 1405. Now it just changed. Grams, 1,405 grams. So what I did is I took that and divided it by 4 and came up with the serving size in grams, which is 351 grams. So I'll just put the bowls on the scale, well, at least mine anyway, and weigh out the serving size so I know exactly what I'm eating and exactly how to point it. Okay, so here is dinner. It is the crab bisque. And here is the bread. That little loaf was cut into 12 very nice slices. The bread is 2 points per piece this size on all 3 plans. And the soup is 5 points on blue and purple and 6 points on green. It looks like a really hearty bowl of soup, so I think 1 bowl will be fine, especially with some bread. So this dinner for me on the blue plan is only 7 points. I have a ton of points left for the day. I will probably be having 2 slices of my homemade bread. Let's see. I haven't tried it yet, but everybody else has. What do we say on the soup?
Thumbs up.
Bueno. Very good.
Good? Restaurant quality soup?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I like to hear, because this was a recipe that I kind of took a few recipes. I have a favorite crab bisque recipe, and I tried to lighten it up, and it was absolutely impossible. I couldn't get it lower than 13 points a bowl. So I kind of took parts of that one and parts of another one and parts of my Maryland crab soup, and this is what I came up with. So there you have it, the crab bisque and the homemade peasant bread. Definitely something you should try if you like homemade bread. And like I said, this is an easy one because there's no kneading. You just plop it. You saw me, you just plop it. When I post the recipe on my website, I'm going to have the complete recipe that makes 2 loaves. And I will put a note there that you can have it. I did have it in this video, so just to be clear on that. But they were both winners in our house, and I hope you like them too. If you do, give this video a thumbs up. Also, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll know every time I upload. I have a ton of new subscribers, so if you are new here, just know that I do cook with me's. I do menu plans every Friday and grocery hauls. I do full day of eating videos several times a week, and usually on the weekend I do a day in the life / family fun day. So I would appreciate it if you would stick around, and if you like my channel and think it would help someone, please feel free to share it on your social media or any groups that you belong to on Facebook. Thanks a lot, guys, and I hope you enjoyed this. I will talk to you soon.